The Daily Code Snippet. So we discussed how to set the primary language of your website for accessibility. What if you have a multilingual site? What extra steps are needed for accessibility? In a multilingual website, the content is presented in more than one language. While a majority of sites present all the content in one language at a time, there are instances where you may be presenting more than one language. For phrases not in the primary language declared in the HTML element, you would add a lang attribute to the element that contains content in another language. Here is an example. Block quote opening tag, lang equals es in quotation marks, paragraph opening tag, la pluma es la lengua de la mente. Miguel de Cervantes from Don Quixote. NP tag, end block quote. In this example, the language is set to es or español. Translated, la pluma es la lengua de la mente means the pen is the tongue of the mind. And it's from Miguel de Cervantes' book, Don Quixote. If you are directing a person to the same content but presented in a different language through a link, you need to indicate to the viewer with an assistive device that they are going to be taken to a version of the site in a different language using the hreflang attribute. The href indicates they are being directed elsewhere, and the lang attribute indicates the language. A opening tag, href equals www.websiteinspanish.com in quotation marks, hreflang equals es in quotation marks, Spanish, end link. So this indicates to the viewer that when the link with the word Spanish is clicked, it will send them to a website whose language is in Spanish or Espanol. If the language of your link is in another language, then you need to use both the hreflang and lang attribute. A opening tag, href, www.websiteinspanish.com in quotation marks, lang equals es in quotation marks, hreflang equals es in quotation marks, Espanol, end link. So in this case, since the link itself is in Spanish, we added the attribute of lang equals es. But we're also taking the viewer to another website where the language of that website is in Espanol or Spanish. So that's why we also need the hreflang attribute. Keep in mind that Google and many search engines do not recognize the lang attribute. So to make your pages more friendly to search engines, it is better not to create pages with more than the primary language. Google and other search engines will determine the languages being used on your page. It is important to understand how to handle languages that are written in a different direction than your primary language. For example, English is written left to right. Since left to right is considered the default, it does not need to be specified. However, for languages written in a right to left fashion, you need to indicate the direction. You need to add the dir attribute to and indicate the value of RTL for right to left. Here is an example. HTML, dir equals RTL in quotation marks. Because right to left languages should be right aligned, you may also need to change the layout of your page to fit the new direction of text. Another issue to consider is character encoding. This is used to decipher letters and symbols. You may understand these as glyphs as part of typefaces. Glyphs have a unique code that represents the character. A popular type of character encoding is Unicode. Unicode supports a wide range of languages and is supported by many operating systems, so it is ideal for use in multilingual websites. With HTML5, in order to specify the use of Unicode, you need to add the char set attribute to a meta element and give it the value of UTF-8. Meta tag char set attribute equals UTF-8 in quotation marks. Finally, when designing a website that supports multiple languages, you'll also need to choose a typeface that supports the languages on your site. This is particularly evident for languages like Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and Arabic. These languages may need certain typefaces that support their glyph system as well as be presented at a different size for legibility. In order to use CSS to target an element using the lang attribute, we can use a pseudo element. HTML lang equals en in quotation marks, colon lang en in parentheses. Font size equals 100%, font family Georgia, Times New Roman, serif. HTML lang equals JA in quotation marks, colon lang JA in parentheses, font size 125%, font family Noto Serif JP, serif. However, this method has inconsistent browser support and will not work on Chrome and Safari. So instead, you may need to add a class attribute. Body lang equals en, class equals English, dot English, font size 100%, font family Georgia Times New Roman, serif. Body lang equals JA in quotation marks, class Japanese in quotation marks, dot Japanese, font size 125%, font family Noto Serif JP, serif. Presented by Designers Learn Code.